Welcome to the WangHiro podcast, where we answer Malaysians' burning questions about personal finance with fact-based answers.
You have 100 ringgit in your pocket right now, but you know that if you don't do anything at all with the money, it will be worth a little or a lot less than 100 ringgit 5 years from now. So how do you protect the value of this 100 ringgit from corroding too much? One of the most popular ways people try to do this is by putting money in gold. But is investing in gold really the best way to preserve your wealth against inflation? Welcome back to the WangHiro podcast. Today, we're diving into one of the oldest ways humans have tried to preserve their wealth, in gold, and analyzing if it is an effective way to preserve wealth. So, John, how did gold actually become the valued asset that we know of today?
Interestingly, that it's very shiny. I think that's one of the first attractions. But jokes aside, I think if you look back in time in history, it's always been a medium of exchange for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, the Chinese, and as we were talking before the podcast, if you watch Chinese dramas, I don't even remember it was in the sleeve. I always thought it was in the bag, but now you mentioned it, right? They actually took it out in the sleeves, right?
I think it depended on the era. Yeah, in some era they did take it out from sleeves. In some era they put it in bags.
In bags, yeah. The sleeves is considered like the pockets, I guess. Yeah. So ancient Greeks, ancient Egyptians, they all use gold coins as a form of currency. And I think one of the main reasons was because it was kind of an inert metal. So what do we mean by inert metal? If you use things like steel, even aluminium or even copper, they have certain chemical reactions with the environment. And like steel, it rusts. So when it rusts, it becomes like ugly, and it doesn't hold its like shine and all that kind of thing. People don't see that probably as a store of value, right? Gold has been used as a form of currency throughout history for several reasons also, apart from the inertness of the metal. One is scarcity. It was very, very difficult to find gold, very rare, okay? It takes quite a bit of work to actually extract, refine it, okay? Second thing is durability. So as I mentioned, that inertness, when you transport it, when it gets in touch with water, all that kind of durability makes it a very good medium of exchange. Third, portability. I don't think that holds true today. Portability. I don't think you would like carrying gold bars around to pay money with, right?
True.
Yeah.
All times have changed.
Yeah, times have definitely changed. I mean, even today, cash, we don't even like to carry
cash.
cash.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
That's for another day.
Correct. I mean, if you see those slim wallets today, it's just probably a few cards and one 50 ringgit bill, that kind of thing. Yeah. So scarcity, durability. Third is the portability in the past, right? The fourth is actually divisibility. Now, divisibility means this. We today, we're so used to denomination of coins, then notes, and obviously the relative size of it makes it like the value. 50-cent coins are big, 10-cent coins are smaller. And I think for gold in the past, the units can be divided. So, a small ingot versus a bar, they will say that, okay, a bar costs like 1,000. I'm just throwing up a number, right? And then the ingot is like 100 or something like that. And last but not least is universality. So that means if you had gold in China and then you brought it to India, during the old Silk Road times, it's recognizable. It's like a standard currency. And I think that's something that's very important because in the past, when civilization was not as developed, certain countries did not have their own currency yet. So by having gold, you have a standardized way of a currency. So I think that's what some certain cryptocurrencies are trying to attain today. Like Bitcoin, it says, regardless of whether you're in the US or whether in China or whether in Malaysia, the denomination is the same, and the universality of it's what matters. So 5: scarcity, durability, portability, divisibility, and universality. Okay. Now, the struggle was this. During the World War, right? Actually, a lot of things changed in the currency system. And we came out with this thing called a fiat currency. Now, fiat currency used to be backed by a physical commodity. Okay, so for every dollar that was actually printed, there's actually a certain amount of gold backing it. Okay, I think it was for every 35. Let me see. Let me try to remember the figures. For every dollar that was printed, for every ounce of gold, there was actually 35 US dollars printed. So that means you have to have a certain ounce of gold, and that ounce of gold will represent 35 US dollars. So every barrel of the US dollar will be able to exchange 35 US dollars for 1 ounce of gold. Okay.
Just curious, just curious, John. Like, could they really go and redeem the gold back then?
This is where the problem came. Okay, this is where the problem came. Okay, so during the war, actually, France actually loaned a lot of gold to the US. Okay, and we're talking about World War II. Okay, so we're fast forwarding all that. Think of it as gold. Every ounce of gold, there's a certain amount of US being printed, and during the World War, in order for France or Europe to actually win the war, they needed to finance the US to get their war machinery going to help fight Nazi Germany, right? Here comes the problem. After the war was won, US was the hero, saved the world, right? But coming towards the 1970s, the US experienced very high inflation, and they had a very big growing trade deficit. So what does a trade deficit means? Meaning, whatever import and export, if there's a balance, that means how much US produce, they sell to the rest of the world, let's say China, Europe, or whatever, versus the things they import. Let's just say they don't have, at that point, the US did not have enough oil. They were a growing nation, they did not have enough oil. So if there's more oil that's being imported that they need to pay someone else versus what is being produced in country and sold, and then they get US dollar in return, that trade deficit, the bigger it is, it's a deficit lah. And that actually put pressure on the US dollar. Now remember, France loaned gold over to the US, right, to finance the war. The US couldn't pay. And yes, the US couldn't pay. So, you were asking, is it true that everyone can change? So it was based on a system of trust. No one wanted to withdraw until then. You see? You get what I mean, right?
Yeah,
then what happens is that, oh no, then the world realized that the value of the US dollar is like declining, right? And US couldn't pay. So in 1971, US President Nixon said that, I'm sorry, I don't think we're gonna, he didn't even apologize. He just said that, the US dollar would not be pegged 35 US dollars per ounce anymore. It would depeg. So it was at the Bretton Woods system that actually depeg all this. And from that day on forth, it literally ended the pegging of US dollar to the gold standard. So what we know today, the fiat currency, the dollar, the money notes currency today, that used to be backed to a physical commodity like gold, is like purely based on, if you use, I was sharing with you prior to the podcast, right, Louis? In the past, if you take a US dollar note, it will say that this US dollar 1 barrel will be able to exchange how much of silver or gold. Okay? Post Bretton Woods, post 1971, the US dollar, you will notice what is printed is "In God We Trust."
Wow. That's like relying on faith, right?
Faith. And that's why it is so important for the banking system and all that kind of thing to actually adapt to this new to the new normal back then. Yeah.
One question that I have, John, how about other currencies then? Are they backed up by anything?
No currency today I know of is pegged to a commodity anymore. And I think that's why the hegemony of the US dollar is so strong today, because they started going off this, so I don't know if you know, but the Brunei is actually pegged directly to the Singapore dollar.
Oh,
the
yeah.
Brunei dollar. Yeah.
I do.
So it's like a fix. And a lot of why I'm using that as an example is because the US dollar, a lot of currency used to peg to the US dollar. You know, Malaysian ringgit used to be pegged to the US dollar at one point of time. 1997, during the Asian financial crisis, every every $1 would be equivalent to 3.8 Malaysian ringgit fixed, pegged. You cannot bring out more than 10,000 Malaysian ringgit out of Malaysia is what you have to declare. Yeah, that was a few of the Mahathir era policies to stem the Asian financial crisis. You had a question?
Oh yeah. So I was just thinking like, so our entire like monetary system is based on faith, basically.
Yes.
Right now.
Yes.
Okay.
Right now. Yes.
Interesting.
The faith to, and that's why I mean, obviously this warrants another explanation. But today, in the past, if you are pegging $35 per ounce of gold, right? That means you are actually limiting the amount of money you can print. Because if you don't have enough gold, you're not taking out or mining or producing enough gold, you cannot print more money. You see where I'm coming from? That means there is a fixed kind of finite amount of dollar because there's a finite amount of gold. But today when you depeg, what happens? You start printing like mad to actually either support trade, to support the economic system. And in the past episodes, we talked about quantitative easing. Do you remember? Yeah, quantitative easing is because when the economy is down, what do you want to do? You want to make sure that more people have more money to be able to spend to ensure that there's a certain inflation rate. Because when a recession happens, when a crisis happens, everyone keeps money. When everyone keeps money, what happens? No one goes out to eat, no one goes out to spend money, the economy comes to a standstill. So all this is actually very new, you know, Louis. All these things are kind of like experiments in the world today. Our economic system is not that old. Don't talk about the past. I mean, in China, in the Egyptian times and all that, they had a kind of like a economic system, but the modern economy as we know today is probably 100 over years old only. It's not that modern in a way.
So it's curious. Like I have a very curious question around this. Like, so since it's not pegged to like the US dollars, right? How exactly is the price of gold determined these days? So like past few weeks we saw it go over 2,000. Like first time in maybe more than a year.
Yeah.
Okay, and this definitely whenever people see prices go up, you know, they call it a bit crazy. They think now it's a time, you know, I put money in gold. But I think it's useful for us to understand what's actually driving the prices up or down.
Great question. I would group them into two main reasons. One is gold is usually seen as a safe haven because, as I explained to you just now earlier about fiat, right? It's one is just trust in the banking system, in the financial system, but gold seems to hold its value and use as a hedge against inflation, because during uncertain times, there's so much volatility and fluctuation in any currency. Gold is seen as, you know, this. I will hold this value, right? And during market volatile times, people always turn to gold to try to kind of protect that. Because you think about it, if you buy into stocks and in a recession, everything goes down, right? And if you buy, I don't know if you noticed the Japanese currency, the yen, it's actually gone down quite a bit as compared to other currencies, right? So you say, oh my God, so where else can I park my money? So gold seems to like hold its value. And we'll discuss more as we look at the uses of gold later. But reason number one, usually it's a safe haven, a hedge against inflation. In recession times, everyone just flocks to it. Everyone will, instead of holding just cash, they will actually hold gold. Okay. Second reason, and this is actually a deeper reason, it's actually what we call a de-dollarization process. Now, remember I told you the France loaned gold to the US, and then the US actually depegged, and the US became the world superpower, militarily, economically, and all that. Now, the struggle is most countries, in order to trade, they have to store US dollar. Now, you think about Japan, for example, after the war, in the go-go years for Japan was the 1980s, the 70s and 80s, where Japan is, but they were a country lacking of resources. So what do they need to do? They have to import oil, What is oil traded in? US dollar.
US
What
dollars.
was gold traded in? US dollar. A lot of commodities, major commodities around the world are traded in US dollar. And because of that, and it was purposely engineered by the US actually, by the way. We won't go into the history, but it's purposely engineered by the US, right? And when so much commodities are actually settled in the US dollar, what do these countries need to do? They have to buy and store US dollars. And because of that, the demand of US dollar just doesn't stop. And now with the trade war, with geopolitical risk and all that, a lot of countries want to stave off the monopoly of the US dollar as a trade currency. That's why you see countries like China going to Iran and says, hey, forget about the sanctions. I'll settle, I'll buy your oil in US dollars. In renminbi. We'll settle in renminbi or Iranian currency, right? They went to, actually, if you've seen India is buying Russian oil, which is sanctioned. they settle either in the Indian currency or the Russian currency, which is ruble.
Wow.
Yeah, so these are ways and means because they don't want, they want to circumnavigate the US dollar as the trade currency. And basically, this means the reduction in reliance of the US dollar that as a primary currency of exchange or a currency of trade. So I hope I answered your question about, what goes into the factors to impact the price of gold. One is usually seen as a safe haven that you can provide a hedge. Secondly, is actually the de-dollarization. So when people want to de-dollarize, they actually go into gold apart from using currencies to actually settle the trade lah. Yeah.
So basically it's about like the price will go up when the demand will go up during certain times, right? Like, okay, when people feel like the value of their currencies are dropping, then they'll buy more gold and that will drive the price up. I mean, it's the same in both cases, right? Whenever, because now countries rely on the US dollar, and when they don't want to do that, then it will also drive the gold price up.
Precisely. Actually, if you read deeper into political articles, you will see that China and Russia are stockpiling gold.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, they're stockpiling gold, and when exactly like what you said, when the demand rises, so probably I'll use this as a framework to describe probably the 5 main reasons why gold actually fluctuate. One, economic indicators. So recession, bad times, people want to hedge so they will start buying gold. Okay, inflation is high, economic growth is slow, people will start turning to safe havens. That's the first economic indicator. Second, currency fluctuation. I've told you one of it is the de-dollarization, and people feel that, hey, I do not want to subscribe to this monopoly. They want to trade in other currencies. Okay, currency fluctuation. Third, geopolitical events, trade wars. Today, hopefully, there's no more big war apart from the one that we're experiencing in Russia and Ukraine today. The moment there's political instability and social unrest, right, everybody will start to be scared. Everybody said, hey, my goodness, can you just imagine, Russian ruble probably had some value prior to the war because you probably buy commodity, because Russia is a very big producer of commodities and even agriculture products. So you may sometimes want to trade in Russian ruble, right? So some countries will keep. But because of this, a geopolitical event, people start dumping ruble, and then the US having sanctions on Russia virtually make almost overnight, the Russian currency devalue straight away. So geopolitical events also indirectly or directly drive up the prices of gold. Fourth, supply and demand. So as you earlier said, the more people buy and there's a finite amount of gold being produced. Actually, there's only about, if I'm not mistaken, 350 million tons being produced per year, maximum capacity, production capacity. Other than that, either they change the efficiency and all, but yeah, the supply is roughly about 350 metric tons a year. So because of this supply and demand, people are more worried on the 3 factors that I mentioned earlier. Then that's why prices of gold go up. And last but not least is speculation and investor sentiment now. What do I mean by speculator and investor sentiment? apart from buying physical gold itself, there's actually gold futures, gold options, paper
Oh.
gold. So when instead of them buying into the physical product or the physical commodity, they actually speculate on the options, and that actually drives, because even if you buy a futures or an option, you need to, at a point of maturity, you need to settle ma. You need that physical commodity to settle ma. But if you don't have enough of that physical commodity, guess what happens? You see?
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
at the end of the day, there is a certain point where the commodity needs to be exchanged. And when the demand is low, when the demand is high, but the supply is low, guess what happens to prices? You see?
Yeah, look, I think that's exactly we can see that exactly happening right now, right? All
Yeah.
of those factors actually go into play to drive up the prices of gold right now. A war, like the geopolitical events, the supply and demand, and the
Yes.
speculation and investor sentiments, economy as well. So I think in Malaysia as well, our currency isn't exactly the most stable one. It
Correct.
fluctuates quite a bit. I think it's fluctuated anywhere between like 4.2 to 4 point, almost 4.7 at one point, right,
Yes.
with the US
Yes.
dollars,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Correct.
So
Correct.
I think from these factors alone, it does look like a good investment for the person who's observing, right?
Yes.
Everything that's supposed to happen to drive the price of gold up is happening. So why don't I just park some money in there, make some money, and even create this like bunch of wealth that can stay there in value for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who are now discussing about, okay, I want to put money in gold, rather than keep in cash, I put it in gold. Some people never bought gold before, now they
Mm.
FOMO, right? they,
Yeah.
they also want to buy gold even if they don't get it. Why don't I go in first, right? Then think about it later, no harm, right? But I
Correct.
think
Correct.
it's worth thinking about, rather than, okay, how to change our cash to gold, thinking about it from an investment perspective.
Correct.
So in some episodes we talk about stock investing. So stocks, right? Stocks are actually shares of companies. We
Yes.
know that the value will go up if the company's value goes up. But with gold, it seems like very dependent on factors outside of those.
Yeah.
So if I'm a beginner, which I am with gold, how should I actually look at it from an investment perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and that's I will put up my bias to the audience first. I am not a fan of gold, you know, but at the same time, I'm no expert. I'm no gold. There's definitely tons of gold expert out there, but I will explain from my angle and my perspective why I think gold, how to evaluate gold as an investment, lah. Right now, first I think we need to understand it's a commodity. It's not, as what you pointed out, a share is a share of the equity of a business, where a business actually generates cash flow. Now, gold, for me, the most important thing as an investment is that if you're buying today with the hopes that it goes up in value much later in the future, right? What's the essence of that investment? If you look at property, let's use property because it's something that most Malaysians or most people around the world will understand. Scarcity, supply and demand. Because if you buy a landed property or even a property in a great location, there is only so much land that you can develop the property on unless it's redeveloped. So gold, it's in the same basket in the sense that there is a finite element of gold around the world. There's a finite element, way of how you're going to get that kind of gold to buy, to purchase. And that, for me, it's one of the biggest parameters to determine gold as an investment. It's purely based on supply and demand. If you dig a little bit deeper, where does the demand of gold actually come from? Maybe you want to take a guess, Louis. Where does the demand of gold actually come from? Is it from countries stockpiling them? Is it used in other users? What do you think it comes from?
I can think of Indians,
Ha, fantastic.
Indian marriages, lots of gold. I
Yeah.
think, I mean, I read that somewhere that India is actually driving the demand for gold just from jewelry alone. Gold
Yes, yeah,
jewelry.
spot on. So in 2019, 48% of the demand of gold is for jewelry. So I
Oh.
want you to think about it. It's almost half, It's almost half, right? The other remaining large percentage, about 15%, is actually used by central banks. So this is where we talk about stockpiling, and I mentioned earlier China and Russia stockpiling gold, right? And there are many sources. If you go out there and read, there's many sources of what is the current stockpile by countries in China, in Russia, in the US. Right now, it seems to point that the US still has the largest stockpile of gold, even though they are the ones that depeg the dollar from the gold, right? The third demand is actually investments. Okay, investments. People who buy either paper gold or physical gold. And there is, and this is where it's interesting, gold, because I told you of the inertness, it is actually one of the best conductors in the world. When we say conductor, electric conductor.
Yep.
Yeah. If gold was cheap, right, Louis, every cable that we have will be in gold.
That's true.
So I don't know if you've seen friends or family members who are audiophiles. They buy AV system, right? The cable that they have is actually gold plated one.
Oh, no, I don't have anyone who
Yeah,
does
you
that.
go and ask your friends who are into AV, whatever. You go and look at the cables they buy, the high-end audio cables, right? It's actually gold because it's there's no loss in signal transmission. So
That's true.
actually, every Intel processor that we have, there is amount of gold inside. So I don't know if you've in there was a time in I think the 1990s. Someone actually stole the entire 40-foot truck of Intel, came out from Intel because they wanted to mine the gold inside.
Oh,
Gold
wow.
prices were so high, they actually stole the whole truck so they could melt the processor down to take out the gold.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was the gold worth more than the processor?
Yeah, I think so. At that point of time, I remember they stole it for two reasons. One is probably they could sell the processor, and two was actually for the gold. So I want to use
Yeah.
this as an example to highlight that the demand for gold, we don't forget that there is actually about 7 to 8% demand for technology as a conductor for electricity. Okay, so coming back to your question about how to evaluate it as an investment versus that of stock, gold doesn't give you cash flow, but stock actually does, because if you think about it, it comes in a form of profit every year because the business is dynamic, it's growing. Whereas for properties, there is some sort of a cash flow from rental, but I doubt, like for gold, there is a way that you can rent your gold bar. You can, to speculators, to people who want to speculate in gold futures. You can actually loan the gold out and all that kind of thing. But that is
Fundamentally, you can't do anything like that, lah.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. And I think that's where, for me personally, again, it's my bias, and it's for the audience for you to decide. I don't like it because there's no cash flow. It's not a dynamic business. And at this point, remember the Warren Buffett article about gold that I shared with you, Louis?
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
you explain to me what you understand about it.
So from my understanding is that Warren Buffett is just like you, doesn't really like gold as an investment. Okay, so one of the things I think I found quite interesting when he said, okay, if you took the same amount of money that you put into gold into like a farm, right? Like a plot of land for agriculture.
Yep.
Over a period of time, you actually get more out of that plot of land versus like this block of gold.
Precisely.
So that really made me think, well, actually that is a great analogy to compare the two.
Yeah.
And I think it made me realize that, okay, it depends now which camp are you in. Do you want to keep hoarding that gold, or are you someone who prefers that any investment you make makes you more money?
Spot on, spot on. I mean, we are not doing justice to Warren Buffett's article. So if you can find it, it's actually a republishment of his letter in 1992, if I'm not mistaken. Is it 2012, and obviously excerpts from his other letters to shareholders. Please go and read it. We don't want to spoil the surprise. Louis and I don't want to spoil the surprise and the joy that you will find reading this article. I'll post probably a link in the comment section where you can find it. It's behind a paywall, but if you're a subscriber to Fortune, you definitely can get it lah. And yeah, just to add on to what you just said, Louis, I think it's anchoring around the point of cash flow, because a farmland can produce cash flow, it can produce goods that can be sold, and it's a dynamic thing because it's growing. Whereas gold, it's like I think Buffett put it, you look at it, you can touch it, you can feel it, it looks pretty, but that's about it lah. Right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And that also brings us to our next point, right? There's so
Yeah.
many ways to buy gold, as you mentioned. About 48% is in jewelry. Okay, so a lot of people actually, like, I have a gold ring right here.
Oh, nice.
It's mostly for like feng shui lah. Yeah. But many people buy physical gold in the form of jewelry for many reasons. I think one of the biggest ones is weddings, during marriages, right?
Correct.
So there are many ways to buy gold, but let's say we take 100 grams of gold jewelry, compare that with a gold bar, and then compare that with paper gold. What's the difference in the value of all of these? I know for sure that jewelry is worth a lot less, because when I pawn it, if you resell it, it's gonna sell a lot less than whatever you bought it for, even with the same amount of gold inside.
Yeah. I would think of it this way. Maybe I explain it from how I view the paper gold, the physical gold, and the gold bar. I think gold bar or gold coins that are minted with a certain standard, they hold the value because it comes with a certificate from the bank. So there is, if you know, our even our Bank Negara, they produce actually gold coins and all that. There's a standard. It's just called kijang. So then the Canadian one, there's a maple standard for it, all that kind of thing. That I think holds its value much better than even paper gold. I could be wrong, happy to be corrected, okay? Because there's a certain purity, and then it's issued by a central bank, so there's actually a bank backing it, right? As you rightly, that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is exactly like what you said, jewelry, because of usage, and when you pawn, definitely there's less value in it. And in the middle, you'll find people who sell paper gold. Now, there are companies that are probably branded as such to borrow a certain very famous bank, and it's actually public gold. There's actually a lot more. Quantum Metal actually does this also. Public Gold does this. Here's the best part. Public gold doesn't belong to public bank, guys. I repeat myself again.
I didn't know that until you told me.
Yeah, a lot of people made that I made that assumption too. When I saw it, it's probably
who came
subsidiary.
first, like, did public gold come after public bank?
I'm not too sure, to be honest, but
Okay.
I don't think public bank is too pleased about them naming themselves public gold. Yeah, because it is in no way kind of related to public bank itself lah.
But then it's such a generic name, right?
Yeah, it's a generic name. I think that's the reason why public bank couldn't.
You can't really trademark that, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So paper gold, there is a certain risk because first of all, you are just holding a contract. You think about it, you don't store the gold, You when you are buying paper gold, literally you're buying a contract that someone holds the gold for you, and there is a certain value, there's a certain safeguard. That means when you go into that, right, they probably must have I would guess a trustee system that says, hey, someone go and audit how much gold you have before you start selling, all that kind of thing. So that adds another variable. Okay. Whereas a physical commodity, a gold, let's say a gold coin from the Royal Canadian Mint or Bank Negara, the Kijang Emas, you actually have it physically. and you can actually pawn it or even resell it, because and it's like a diamond ring lah, obviously it's a bad analogy because diamond rings standardization are different, but because you have the certificate and the banking of a central bank, right, the value holds itself versus that of paper gold. Because paper gold, right, the company can just go bust, that's it, your contract, you don't have the physical gold. Right.
And how do you know if the gold is there, right?
Yeah,
How
exactly.
do you know?
It's a
Like,
big question mark. Okay, it's a
yeah, we
big
don't know
question
if
mark.
it's there. If it could just be an empty vault or no vault at all.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
sounds like actually if we have a contract for some amount of gold, it sounds like how the US currency started, right?
Precisely,
Something like that.
precisely.
That's
But
very
that you have a
interesting.
central bank backing it. This is a private
Mm.
company. It's different,
That's true. That's true. Mm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so let's say if I buy the coins from Bank Negara,
Hmm.
I have to keep that myself, lah. I keep it
That's
in my house.
right. That's
So
right.
that's
So
the security issue.
cost is on you, It cost is not on bank, and
Mm.
the moment it leaves the bank, is no longer the problem. It's on
Mm.
you how to securitize this, how to safeguard, all
Wow.
that kind of thing.
In
Yeah.
fact, if we consider it from that angle, John, I think the value of gold would drop a little bit, just because you have to keep it safe,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
If you bought this amount of gold and you had to find a way to make sure it's safe, I don't think you should put it in your house. You should put
Put
it
it under your
somewhere.
pillow, I guess.
Yeah, if you put it in your house, I don't know where what is a safe place. Maybe you need to have a proper like
Safe law? You have to buy a safe and then
safe.
combination
But then
lock
the
and all.
safe is actually not the safest place, right? Because it's a safe, right?
Yeah,
Everyone
and
can see the
everybody's
safe.
aiming for it.
Yes, correct. So you have to put it like maybe a special room. Like there's so many costs associated with just keeping it. And
Correct.
then there's also insurance for home contents.
Correct.
Yeah. So I think these are things that when we buy gold, we don't really think about. Like with paper gold, there's actually the risk of not actually having the gold there.
Yeah.
Then if you buy the gold coins, you have to keep it safe.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, this is the things I actually never thought about, but it's a
It-
very interesting angle to look at it that I think the audience can also consider. Maybe you can also share with us, guys, how do you keep your gold?
Yeah,
If
how do you
if
keep
you're
your gold? I
buying the
mean,
billions,
don't tell us exactly
coins,
where you keep it, but where rough, what are the
yeah, what do you do with your gold? Very, very curious. I'm just extremely curious how
Yeah.
people, if you buy gold as an investment, like the pure gold, do you keep it like somewhere in your house, or is there some company that can do it for you? But again, you keep it under the company, that things
They
can
will
happen
sure charge you
also.
one. There's no such thing as free lunch
Mm,
one. Exactly.
mm.
Yeah.
Then there's definitely will force you to buy insurance for that. Yeah.
Precisely.
Mm,
And not only that, coming back to the paper gold that we talked about, that when you're buying and selling, right? People will ask, hey, how do these companies make money? Because if you're buying and selling exactly the same prices as spot, because it's like currency, go up and down. There's a market. There's actually a buy and sell value for gold, right? Some of these companies, because they store gold, they actually make from the spread. So instead of, let's just say today it's like 2,000 US dollars per kilogram or something like that. I don't follow the prices, but I'm just throwing out a number, 2,000, right? Instead of them quoting you 2,000, they probably quote you 2,005 or something. Right? There's definitely a spread. So it does matter to an investor, because you will actually you need to account for that spread whenever you are buying and selling the profit. Obviously, if you buy 1,006 and then you sell at 2,005, the spread will not be that big. But if the spread, if you buy at 2,000, you want to sell at 2,100 or something, and the spread is so thin, then what are you making? Yeah.
mm. So I mean, it just sounds very complicated to keep all this gold in your house, or even like let another company keep your gold, right? It sounds extremely complicated, unless you really know what you're doing. Yeah.
Correct.
In that company, then you go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next angle that we look at gold, right? I think it's appropriate to think about gold as a currency, right? We talked about it earlier. In fact, historically, it has been a currency. It was a currency.
Correct.
China, all many countries back then. And actually, like, very funny story, as a kid, I really thought that gold ingots were still in use. Really,
I think
really
you've been fed too many chocolate gold
correct,
ingots during Chinese New Year lah.
correct, and too much drama, Hong Kong drama after school. So when in my brain, right, as a primary school kid, I was like, okay, when I am an adult, I'll have my bag of ingots. But obviously, nowadays we don't use gold as a currency anymore per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah.
But let's assume that one day fiat becomes completely worthless. And I think that's the idea around some people hoarding gold, right? One day my 100 ringgit bill becomes meaningless. Then I can now take out these gold coins to pay for things. So is it something that can really happen? And is it actually plausible for us to use gold to pay by then?
Anything's possible, but probability wise, I do feel it's a big question mark about how we can revert back to that. I think a lot of you heard of this term called doomsday people
Yeah.
who think about doomsday cult and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are big proponents of gold because in a way it goes back to like you're gonna lose television, you're gonna lose the internet or whatever, right? And what holds because during doomsday, banks is not gonna work, all right. You probably need to migrate from country to country to find where resources are, food, water, and all that. And if that particular currency is just gone down in value, the only thing universal for them are actually gold or silver. I know some people doomsday who speak publicly, they put a lot of money into silver because silver is cheaper, but also kind of recognized as a medium of exchange or a currency. Your question about this scenario likely to happen, I think not to say it's impossible, but the probability for me is very, very low. Okay. Whether gold still stacks up as a good it has good whether it has good characteristics as a currency, I doubt that when you are in a doomsday era and you got so many things to carry. Can you imagine carrying gold bars to try to buy something? So yeah, but at the same time, in terms of universality, I think gold commodity does hold up. Gold, silver, even precious metal. You know, we never know who. What was the name? Yeah, I remember now. You know, Wolverine
Yeah,
in the
Wolverine.
movie. Yeah, the metal he uses is adamantium.
Wow, I can't remember. I mean, he was my favorite, but then I cannot remember what he was using.
Yeah, the metal that's in
Okay.
his body is this thing called adamantium. So we keep on joking because it's so durable, right? It can be more precious than gold. We don't know what will be the precious metal of the future. You know.
Correct.
Yeah. So again, I think everything that we say today, I feel is very speculative because while it has worked in the past, you do not know what is valuable in the future. Who knows? Like there is another metal to be discovered, even lighter, even more inert, that that can be used as a currency exchange or medium of exchange. So, for me, if you want to de-risk and you feel that it's a good hedge, buy some just to comfort. But for me, I'm not that lah. I'm definitely not a believer of all this lah.
I think it all boils down to what you believe will happen in the future, right?
Correct.
Nothing is for certain. I mean, in my opinion, there will always be some kind of barter system in place during a doomsday time.
Precise.
Okay.
Yes.
Like maybe if you are on an island where food is scarce, does anyone care about gold anymore?
Yeah, exactly.
It might be that coconuts become more valuable than gold.
Correct.
So these are the things that I constantly think about, like certain things that we think are for certain right now. It seems like it, but when we project into the future, we can't really see everything. We can only assume maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. My take on it is moderation. Don't go crazy on
don't go
anything.
nuts.
Don't go nuts. It may not turn out that way. Just take little bets everywhere.
Correct.
I think a few years ago, right, a lot of people actually took bets in crypto. Crypto because like during the pandemic, similar reasons I think to what drove the price of gold up, right?
Right.
the world was facing this like unknown thing.
Yeah,
Everyone was
doomsday lah.
scared. Put everything into crypto. A lot
Yeah.
of people put money into crypto, and as we've seen, in some cases, people have lost their entire life savings right now from scams like FTX.
Yeah.
But there are still proponents of like crypto, and most of the time, people who buy crypto tend to be supporters of gold, I find, because they have similar mindsets, yet they are quite different.
Yeah.
They are both scarce. Like if we take Bitcoin as an example, there are only gonna be 21 million Bitcoins, right? From a report I read about 2 weeks ago, about 18 million of that has been mined already.
Mine. Correct. But it gets harder as you mine
Yes,
closer to
correct.
21 million. Yeah.
Right. So, but the difference is that, okay, gold, at least you can touch it, right? You can touch gold, you can do something with gold. You don't really need to depend on electricity.
Yes.
Okay, if one day you need to use that gold, you can use that gold. But with crypto, it's kind of abstract, and you always need some form of electricity to use it, right? So, I mean, what do you think, John? How does Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies stack up against gold?
I love the point that you brought out electricity. So in the future, when doomsday happen, better make sure you have a bicycle and a dynamo so you can power up your Bitcoin wallet. Just pedal, and then you just say, "Hey, I've got some Bitcoin." What time so?
Oh my god! I think I have to pedal for 1,000 years to mine one Bitcoin.
Yeah. Actually, the proponents of Bitcoin, as you rightly pointed out, they use gold as an example or parallel, and to give analogies of how it's scarce, it's a finite. That one, I think the key word is a deflationary asset.
Oh,
Rather
what
than
does that mean?
deflationary asset, it means it holds its value. An inflationary asset means it depreciates in value. Whereas a deflationary, because of supply, it's a finite supply, then that means the value of it goes up rather than
Okay.
So as a store of value, you want to have a deflationary asset, right? That it means the value goes up. And I think I personally I do believe in some sort of a digital currency. I do believe in the power of blockchain. I do own certain cryptos. But as you pointed out also about it being a non-physical commodity, non-tangible, I think it's hedging your bets. For me, these are things that I will not put or shouldn't put more than 10% or even less than more than 5% of your net worth into it. It's more of a hedge, more of like an experiment for you as well. Whereas my main assets are still in very much businesses through equities, public equities. Today, in this current economic scenario, current economic condition, I think that has provided a good form of cash flow. There's this study, and I did put it in the book that we're producing, Louis, from Jeremy Siegel. He did a study from 1802 to all the way until 2012 about the different asset classes. And gold did not hold up very well. I think as an inflationary asset, in terms of not inflationary, in terms of return, it was about only 3%, 3 to 4% over 200 years. Whereas stocks actually compounded about more than 6% net of inflation. If it gross is I think about 9%. So as a store of value, right? As a currency, I don't think gold, Bitcoin is still very new. We're not into like even 40 years of Bitcoin yet. As a store of value, it remains to be seen lah. Bitcoin. So it's a question mark. In terms of scarcity, there's a digital ledger. There's a cap of 21 million, but I don't know. To be honest, I think the way I put it is I don't know. But based on what I've seen in gold, it was not a very good asset to invest in, because over a long period of time, 200 years, 3 point something percent or less.
3 point something percent. It's as good as a fixed D. account, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. I
Yeah.
think it's no absolute, not even compound. It's absolute return is 3 point something, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah,
Absolute,
yeah.
absolute. Okay.
Just for those who are listening to this, just type in Jeremy Siegel stock for the long run. You will see a graph, and obviously in our book, I'll explain a little bit more. But based on what you see from Jeremy Siegel, you will see that gold performed really badly as an asset.
As an
Yeah,
asset, right? Yeah.
as an
So I
asset.
think it's
Yeah,
it's worth considering that how you are viewing gold, right? If you're just hanging on to gold,
correct.
as a psychological comfort, maybe it's worth it. But as an investment, maybe you have to consider alternatives as well, like what are the returns on those investments.
That's right.
But I mean, if someone is like considering, right, their newbie, does gold have any place at all in an investment portfolio, in your opinion?
Great question, and I think it's a good segue to the Reddit case study that you mentioned. That 20-year-old guy, he's a complete
Oh, okay. Yeah,
newbie.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Let's
because
get
it's a
into
good
that.
thread that I thought that we could explain it straight away as well.
So we love to just dig out some of these Reddit threads because they represent very real case studies, and
Yeah.
hope that if you find yourself in this Redditor, you'll find the recommendations or some thoughts that John will share useful. Okay.
Yeah.
So this Reddit thread reads: Is investing in gold a good start? I'm 20 years old and I've been doing a bit of research about investing. So then gold came up to me and I was wondering if investing in gold is any good. Although I'm sure it does bring goods. I was wondering if there are any of you here who invests in gold. It would be great if anyone could let me know on how the journey's been. Clearly, I would like to try and make gold investing a long-term thing. And I would appreciate if any of you to put in some advices or any tips on what to do. I'm not sure where to start. If there are any other better alternatives in investing other than gold, do let me know as well. Many thanks.
Yeah. So again, as I said, I will have to make assumptions. 20-year-old, I don't know whether he has, but let's assume that he does not have any other portfolio, any other investments. And I also have to make assumption that he probably has a steady kind of income and not have a different lumpy incomes. I wouldn't advise to start with gold first, to be honest. I think, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, it is used as a hedge, right? A doomsday hedge. When you find hedging instruments as an asset, usually they don't do very well in terms of growth. I think that's the key point. Secondly, if you were to buy, remember that band of gold, how you buy gold as an investment, that spectrum, right? One, you can buy the physical, then the other one, it's the jewelry or the paper gold. Usually, if you're going for the highest end of the spectrum, the Kijang Emas or Royal Canadian Maple Leaf, these don't come cheap. You're talking about 5 figures at least, the cheapest.
Wow.
Yeah, because I don't think they'll make 5 grams for you, or less, or 1 gram. They'll probably make it like in bigger denominations, right? I don't know. I've never bought. I've did research on them a very long time ago. Some of my friends, they were kind of like, hey, you got a hedge and but that was after they already had a stock portfolio, they had a real estate portfolio, and then the economy. I think this was circa 2007, 2008, 2009, during the economic crisis, global financial crisis, and they were looking at gold. But for someone who is a 20-year-old, I would rather that you look at growth assets, things like either, for me, I looking back in hindsight, I don't think property was a good thing. I think stocks or ETFs or even unit trusts will be a better place to start lah, I would say. Yeah, rather than gold. Gold is kind of like a rich man's game, for the lack of a better word. Yeah,
Makes
as
sense.
an
Makes
asset.
sense. I think the key word here is investing, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
earlier we had the comparison between stocks and gold, and if you look at it from a purely investment standpoint, you'll find that gold doesn't really give you that kind of returns.
Correct.
And if we project timeline 10 years, it's probably not gonna happen. Like a doomsday thing will not play out. I don't think
Yeah.
so. Like
Yeah.
a doomsday scenario will probably not play out. But if you invest it in the right companies, you might get returns within that 10 years. You can already sell your stocks by then.
Precisely. Yeah. 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 So I think probably to wrap things up as well, any investment that you would want to go to, I think spend at least for me, especially if you're a newbie. Like for me, when I started into stocks, it took, man, I'm how many years? Coming close to 2009, Louis. So how many years? 2009, you're talking about at least 15, 16 years. Yeah. Even then, I'm still scratching the surface and I'm still learning. And I think for any investing as asset class, spend at least a week to 2 weeks just to understand it. Find any free advice that you can find. Yes, it may be done in good faith, but you should not rely only on one source. So spend at least a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or even a month researching what you want to buy into. Secondly is determine whether it's kind of like a hedge. The what you see it as an asset. If it's a hedge, very likely you talk about growth, it's not going to be there. It's just the characteristics of that asset class. You talk
Makes
about
sense.
land, right? It's you talk about gold is usually used as a hedge. Usually used as a hedge. Yeah. So again, the third thing is also cash flow. When you are buying into an asset for investment, the better it produces cash flow, the more highly valued it will be. So once you look at gold and go ahead.
Yeah, so I just thought about like also reminding our audience that because the gold prices are up right now, scams are everywhere. So you have to look at things from, what John mentioned, that standpoint where gold is a hedge. It's very unlikely to give you the returns that some may claim.
Yep.
And it's very likely that if you put your money in there, you might lose it to a Ponzi scheme, or it actually will just drop in value in a short period of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Anything that has gone up as an investor, how do you make money? Regardless of it's a hedge, supply demand, cash flow producing asset, you buy when everyone else is not looking, and you sell when everyone else is looking at it. And I've learned that lesson the hard way. Most of the time, even for my equities portfolio, when people are all rushing into the game, right? And there was this glove mania and all. I bought gloves way before the glove mania. So when the glove mania happened, I was already way back in position 3-4 years ago. But what was my mistake? My mistake was topping up.
Oh no.
So as an example, I bought Hartalega way back in 2017. Okay, so my cost price was really low. At a point of time, even some of the so I used to train. So some of the students that had positions in Hartalega, by the time it was like 13, 14 ringgit, they were like, there's no cost to their shares because they bought it so early, right? And I think that's the FOMO is always kicking in now. The fear of missing out because it goes higher and higher and people chase after a high, right? That's exactly opposite of investing. You should actually look at it when no one else is looking, do your own homework, determine the value and put in, and that's where your conviction will pay itself when the thing goes up again. But when the thing goes up already and you could start chasing, there's this very famous phrase in investing world, it's called reversion to the mean. So any high will come down to a low. Any
That's
low
true.
will actually, the
That's
most
true.
important is
That's true.
determine the value. If you determine the value and you know where the mean is, that means stocks on average over the very long period of time should return anywhere between 8 to 12% for great companies, or 6% for like okay businesses, right? And then go back into history, go and plot it out and see. I think the one that I mentioned earlier about stocks for the long run, Jeremy Siegel, have a look at that. And then you come to some sort of a framework to know, hey, this asset class, these are the kind of things that I should benchmark upon. Is a hedge instrument and all that. Then wow, if today, over the past 1 year, it's already jumped by like 100%. Gosh, are you expecting it to jump another 100% next year?
True, true. I
Yeah,
think you're
yeah,
supposed to like take it out as soon as you can, I think.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's
So
a lot of emotional control, lah, I think.
that's right. That's right. I mean, if all of us are robots and we know how to like logically assess every single investment, I think all of us will be multi-millionaires.
It, but at
Yeah.
the same time, I think some systems might collapse because
Yeah.
the ups and downs are actually determined by human emotions.
Correct.
So chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's a great discussion again with you, John, about gold. The reason I brought this topic up was because there's a lot of rush around gold, and as I mentioned, scams around gold, and I thought that we would have a level-headed view about gold, and help our audience to make their own decision on how they should park gold into their portfolio. It's a hedge. If someone is approaching you about gold as a high returns kind of investment, maybe you should be wary.
Yeah.
Look into like what's behind the company, etc. In any case, thank you so much, John, for today's.
Most welcome, and thank you for bringing out this topic. For the audience out there, if you love content like this, subscribe to the channel, give it a like, hit that notification bell so that you know when new videos are out, and I will see you guys in the next video.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.